So in this part we are going to be graphing using these x and y intercepts. So I came up with about 4 problems here, and we're going to go ahead and use those x and y intercepts to solve. So let's take a look at the first one. First thing, remember, we did on part 1 is when we found the x-intercept, we're setting y equal to 0. So let's write down the x-intercept. And again, we're going to cancel out this y term. So all I'm left with is a 2x equals 8. And so I go ahead and solve that by doing opposite operations. So I'm going to divide by 2. And that's going to give me my x component for this graph. And so the x component is going to be x equals 4. And so this is the x-intercept. Remember, we set y equal to 0. So the ordered pair for this is 4, 0. So if I were to plot that, I'd go over 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and put the dot right there. Now we'll take a look at the y-intercept because we need one more point to be able to draw this line. So we go ahead and write down the y-intercept. Remember, the y-intercept is when we set x equal to 0, the opposite of what we did for the x-intercept. So all we've got left is a negative 4y equals 8. And so when we solve this, we need to go ahead and divide by the coefficient again, just like we did on the last part. And we end up with a y, this time, equals negative 2. So remember, we substituted 0 in for x, so that ordered pair is 0, negative 2. And now we've got our 2 points. We can go ahead and plot the next one and draw a line. So we go over 0 and just down 1, 2 spaces. And then we can go ahead and draw the line between those points and extend it just a little past those 2 points that I wrote. And draw some arrows at the end. We got ourselves our line. So that's one example. Let's take a look at the next one. Here we're going to do the same sort of thing. The difference on this one is that we have 2 negatives this time. And the other thing is, you notice that when we do the division, we don't end up with the other's coefficient on this one as well. So let's take a look at just that x-intercept to start with. And we're going to take the y term and set it equal to 0. So all we're left with is a negative 3x equals negative 12. So we go ahead and do some division here. So we divide by negative 3 both sides. And you'll notice that the negative signs are going to cancel this time. So here we are left with an x equals positive 4. So remember, we put a 0 in for y. So x is 4 when y is 0. So now we've got our point. We can go ahead and plot that. So we go over 1, 2, 3, 4. Put a dot right there. Next one, we are going to find out the y-intercept. And the way we're going to do that is write down y-intercept. We're going to take the x term and set it equal to 0. So all I'm left with is a 2y equals negative 12. So I go ahead and divide by the coefficient again, which is 2, and it gives me my y value. So y equals negative 6. So remember, I put in a 0 for x. So when x is 0, y is negative 6. So we can go ahead and plot that point over 0 and down 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. Let me count that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now I've got my 2 points. I can go ahead and draw the line between those points. Again, extend it all the way past those points. Put some arrows at the end so that you can show that the line goes on forever in both directions. So let's take a look at another type of problem. This time we've got a different scenario because we have the y by itself. Before, we always had x and y on the same side of the equal sign. And that's what you want when you're solving one of these problems. You always want to have y and x on the same side, so that when you set 1 equal to 0, you just have to do the one step to solve. And so that's what I'm going to do first. I'm going to go ahead and just move this 1/3 back to the other side. So I'm going to do that by just subtracting 1/3 x. I'm not trying to get rid of the fraction. You could if you wanted to. It wouldn't hurt anything, but it's not really necessary. I'll just subtract 1/3 x from both sides, and now I've got a new equation that will look a little bit more familiar. And it doesn't matter which term you write first. I could write y first. Y minus 1/3 x equals -2. That's all that was left on the right-hand side of the equal sign. So now we've got an equation where y and x are on the same side. So when we go ahead and solve for x and solve for y, we just have the one step to do. So when we go ahead and do that, we'll write down x-intercept. And we'll go ahead and cancel out this y term by setting it equal to 0. So all I'm left with is a -1/3 x equals -2. So in order to eliminate a fraction as a coefficient, I'm going to do an opposite operation. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. So we'll show some parentheses around that term. So I'm multiplying by -3/1, and do the same thing on the other side. Now remember, -3/1 is the same as just -3, so I just wrote that term down. And when I do that, I'm left with just x, and it now equals +6. So I've got myself my first order pair when x is 6, y is 0. Or I could say that the other way. When y is 0, x is 6. So now we've come up with the x-intercept. Let's do the y-intercept. So the y-intercept is going to be, again, when you set the x term this time equal to 0. So in this one, we've got our answer. Y equals -2. This was nice. The y-intercept's already there for us. So when x is 0, y is -2. So I plot that point. So I go over 0. And there's down 2, so 1, 2 spaces. Put that dot there, and we can go ahead and plot the other one as well, since I didn't do that earlier. I go over 6 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Put that point there, and I've got my 2 points. I can go ahead and draw my line. So between the points, put arrows at the end. Got ourselves our answer. So let's take a look at the last one here. Same sort of situation as the letter C. I want to get the x's onto one side. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to move this 1/2 over. I'm going to add 1/2 x to both sides. And again, it doesn't matter which one goes first. You just go ahead and rewrite your equation. So I still have that 2/3 y, and now it's a plus 1/2 x. And it all equals 4. So when I'm solving, start with the x-intercept first. I'm going to set y equal to 0. So when I do that, that cancels out this y term. So all I'm left with is the x term on the left-hand side. It equals 4. So to solve this, I'll do the same as I did before. I'm going to multiply by that reciprocal. So the reciprocal is 2/1. So I'll multiply the other side by 2 as well, or 2/1. It means the same thing. And when I do that, I'm left with an x equals 8. So it's 8, 0. When y is 0, x is 8. So I go over 8 spaces to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And put the dot there. Now let's take a look at our y-intercept. Y-intercept. We're going to cancel out the x term this time, so we're left with just the 2/3 y, and this all equals 4. So to solve this one, we multiply by that reciprocal again, and remember, watch for that cross-canceling when you do this problem. So I'll go ahead and draw some parentheses around that term, and I'm multiplying by 3 over 2. Do the same thing on the other side, so 3 over 2. And treat that 4 as 4 over 1. And look for the cross-canceling. See, 2 goes into 4 2 times. So I multiply these two numbers together, and I get my answer. So in this case, we've got y equals 6. So when x is 0, y is 6. So now I've got my point, so I go over 0 and just up 6 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we put our dot. And then we just take our ruler or straight edge or something nice and straight, or just do the best job we can and draw a line between those points. And put some arrows at the end to show that it goes on forever. So that is graphing using x and y intercepts.